This is Middle East Brief with Avi Kaner, your daily intelligence update on what actually matters.
Today, I want to talk about the Golan Heights, because there is a claim repeated so often that many people simply assume it is an undisputed fact, that Israel conquered Syrian territory in 1967, annexed it, and therefore Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights violates international law. The actual history is considerably more complicated than that, and Israel has a serious historical and legal case for sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Let's start before 1967. In fact, let's go back before Israel and Syria even existed as independent countries. For centuries, this entire region was part of the Ottoman Empire. There wasn't an international border separating a sovereign Israel from a sovereign Syria. After World War I and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, Britain and France divided much of the region into areas under their respective control. Britain controlled the territories that ultimately became present-day Israel and Jordan. France controlled the territories that became present-day Syria and Lebanon. And Europeans then literally drew lines on a map. And what eventually became the boundary between Israel and Syria originated, in many respects, as a fictitious line separating British and French-controlled territories. It was not a border negotiated between Israel and Syria. Neither Israel nor Syria even existed as independent states when the line was originally drawn by Great Britain and France. That Mandate-era boundary eventually acquired international legal significance, but understanding where it came from is important. Then came 1948. Israel declared independence. Syria invaded the new state of Israel. When the fighting finally stopped, Israel and Syria signed the General Armistice Agreement of 1949, and this document is critical to understanding the Golan today. It was an armistice. It was not a peace treaty. The agreement specifically protected the rights, claims, and positions of both sides concerning an eventual peaceful settlement. And Article 5 went even further. It said that the armistice demarcation line was, quote, not to be interpreted as having any relation whatsoever to ultimate territorial arrangements, end quote. Think about those words. No relation whatsoever to ultimate territorial arrangements. So Israel and Syria themselves were saying that the military arrangements ending the fighting were not a final territorial settlement. The ultimate settlement was supposed to come later, but it never did. Instead, Israel spent the next 18 years facing a hostile Syrian military from the commanding heights of the Golan. Syrian forces shelled Israeli communities below. There were repeated military confrontations. Then came the Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel captured the Golan Heights. And after that war came another enormously important document, United Nations Security Council Resolution 242. Resolution 242 affirmed the principle against the acquisition of territory by war. And that principle is important. But the resolution did not simply declare the pre-war lines permanent borders and order Israel to return to them. Instead, it also affirmed the right of every state in the region to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries, free from threats or acts of force. And those words were chosen for a reason: secure and recognized boundaries. The framework envisioned a negotiated peace in which Israel would live behind boundaries that were both recognized and secure. With Syria, that final peace settlement never happened. Instead, 6 years later, Syria tried to retake the Golan by force during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Israel survived that attack. In 1974, Israel and Syria signed yet another agreement. And once again, it was not a peace treaty establishing a permanent border. It was a disengagement agreement separating their military forces. So consider the history. A colonial-era line originally separating British and French-administered territories. War in 1948. An armistice in 1949 that explicitly did not determine the ultimate territorial settlement. 18 years of hostility. War in 1967. Resolution 242 and its call for secure and recognized boundaries. Another Syrian attack in 1973. A military disengagement agreement in 1974, and still no final Israeli-Syrian peace treaty. Then, in 1981, Israel extended its law, jurisdiction, and administration to the Golan Heights. Most governments rejected that action, and the United Nations continues to regard the Golan as occupied Syrian territory, which it is not. And that is a prevailing international position. But it does not end the legal discussion, because international law does not exist in a historical vacuum. Israel did not simply wake up one morning, cross the peaceful border of a friendly neighboring country, and seize territory for imperial expansion. Israel and Syria were enemies. They had never made peace. The ultimate territorial settlement contemplated by their own armistice agreement had never been achieved. Israel captured the Golan during a war after years of Syrian attacks and confrontation against Israeli civilians. Syria subsequently attempted to recover it through another war, and the international diplomatic framework after 1967 called for a settlement producing secure and recognized boundaries. There is therefore a serious legal argument that sovereignty over the Golan should be understood within the context of the final territorial settlement that Israel and Syria never achieved. And then there is geography. Stand on the Golan Heights and look west. Below you is northern Israel. For years, Syrian forces controlled these commanding heights over Israeli communities and fired at these Israeli communities. Israel knows from experience what it means to have a hostile military sitting above its own citizens. No responsible Israeli government should ignore that history. And look at what Israel has created in the Golan. Jewish communities, Druze communities, agriculture, wineries, businesses, schools, tourism, infrastructure, religious freedom. Families have now lived their entire lives there. The Golan isn't some temporary Israeli military outpost. It is a thriving part of Israeli society. And in 2019, the United States formally recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Most countries have not followed America's lead, but American recognition demonstrated that Israel's sovereignty claim is not some proposition that another sovereign state is incapable of recognizing. So the next time someone tells you that the legal history of the Golan is simple, ask them a few questions. Who originally drew the boundary? The answer, Britain and France, before Israel and Syria existed as independent countries. What did Israel and Syria agree to in 1949? The answer, an armistice that explicitly said its military arrangements would not determine the ultimate territorial settlement. Did Israel and Syria subsequently negotiate a final peace border? No. What did Resolution 242 call for? It called for a just and lasting peace in which states could live within secure and recognized boundaries. Did Syria make peace? No. Instead, Syria went to war again in 1973. So nearly 8 decades after the 1949 armistice, Israel and Syria have still never concluded the final peace settlement that was supposed to replace those military arrangements. That doesn't make the international legal dispute disappear, but it does destroy the simplistic argument that there was an unquestioned, permanently agreed Syrian-Israeli peace border. Israel crossed it in 1967, and therefore there is nothing more to discuss. There is much more to discuss. Israel has history on its side. Israel has compelling security considerations on its side. Israel has a serious legal argument on its side. And Israel has nearly 60 years of reality on the ground, demonstrating why the Golan Heights are essential to the security of Israel. Israel should make that case confidently. It should make it proudly. And it should never apologize for protecting its people from the very heights from which they were once attacked. The Golan Heights are part of Israel, and Israel has every right to defend its claim to them. Thank you.
This is Middle East Brief with Avi Kaner. If you want clarity, not noise, follow and share. Continue the conversation on X at Avi Kaner. Back tomorrow